Hello there and welcome to the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. This is season 15, episode 69. Nice. This episode is sponsored by Sideshift.ai, Layer 2 Labs, Nuance, and Hulling.ch. And we are now live with Zach Herbert, the CEO of Foundation Devices. And he has a pretty exclusive announcement to make about something that's simultaneously a device, but also a software improvement. And it's something that aims to have this holistic approach to hardware wallets where you don't just have the hardware, but also access to this larger app store for open source stuff. And also it tries this ambitious mission to replace your Yubikey, which I think is pretty cool and is a selling point for the device. But I'm done with the shilling. Let's hear from you, Zach.
Hey, Vlad, it's good to speak to you again after, I guess, a few years.
Yeah, so I think it was in the summer of 2021 that we recorded an interview. At the time, you were fresh on the market with the Passport, first generation. You actually sent me one of those Founders Edition, which came with the Bitcoin white paper.
Oh, yeah. I forgot that we did that.
Yeah, it's super cool. I think it was a limited edition of 100.
One. I saved 615 for myself, numbered, but it's we did 1,000 of them, and I believe we shipped that summer of 2021.
That's a weird flex, sir. You just doxed the amount of Bitcoin that you have. Yeah. Anyway, I gotta congratulate you from the get-go because it's a very competitive landscape out there. There are lots of hardware wallet companies. Very few of them actually survive, and it seems like no matter how hard you try, you still have the two market leaders, and it's all about Ledger and Trezor. They seem to have this Lindy effect where they gathered most of the attention early on, and they're so OG and have so much funding that they're able to basically not innovate too much and sell devices that are very similar. But actually, my challenge for you today throughout the episode is to convince me. So we didn't get into the details of your new device and software ecosystem, but you're going to have to convince me to switch from my trusty Trezor Model T, which I have been using for multiple years, the way in which I use it, and I have to explain this to you because it might be very different from how most people use it. I erase it every time. So I don't store anything in the flash memory, and then I recover from seed. And I like the Trezor Model T specifically because it has this touch screen. It's faster to type. It's like my old Nokia phone. So it's easy for me to recover from seed if I need to do that. So that's the way in which I use it. It's not the conventional way of setting a pin, because there's this recurring joke, right, with the Ledger. I've seen this many times being said that Ledger, they talk about this industry. What's the word for it? Their superior technology for security and blah, 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 this super safe, secure chip. But you can unlock their devices just by typing the PIN, which usually is the birthday of the user. That's very funny. And it's actually true because Ledger discourages you from using a passphrase. So where was I going with this? Let's talk about what's new with Foundation Devices. And I know that you took the name from the novels, right?
We did. Yeah, the
about
Asimov
Foundation.
Novels. Yes.
Asimov. How do you say that in American English?
I say Asimov.
Asimov. We say Asimov here in Eastern Europe.
It sounds classier.
Okay, so what's new? What's the name of your new device?
Yeah.
And why should people consider it?
So, no, I'm really excited to first bring something new to market after 2 years. It's kind of crazy that 2 years have gone by since we began shipping our second generation Passport, which is the one that we've still been selling, today. But we're announcing our third generation Passport, and we're specifically not calling it a hardware wallet. we're calling it a personal security platform. And so hopefully, as I explain more about how it works, both from the hardware and then the software perspective, maybe you'll find us deserving of the new product category name. But it's a very different kind of device than what we've done so far. It's a touchscreen device, and I'm sure you'll be able to go see it all over the internet and our website and everything like that. And it's kind of hard to show on camera, but it's a nice compact touchscreen device. This is it compared to a normal sized iPhone, and it has a 3.5-inch touchscreen display, and it runs our new operating system, which is one of our biggest announcements today, called KeyOS, where it's much more similar to an operating system and a user experience that you would find on a smartphone, as opposed to the kind of UIs that you're used to on a hardware wallet. So a lot of new stuff there, but the general idea is that instead of just being a hardware wallet, we're also trying to secure your entire digital life and give you the tools to do that. But then we're also trying to give you the ability to infinitely expand the device's functionality over time, and really customize it and make it your own. That's going to take us time to do, because we're going to have to build a whole developer ecosystem from scratch. We're going to be launching, that ecosystem mid 2025. But what we're shipping in, end of Q1 of 2025 is the same Bitcoin wallet functionality that we have on Passport today. We're shipping 6-digit 2FA codes and FIDO2 security keys, basically Yubikey functionality via NFC and USB. We're also shipping 50 gigabytes of encrypted storage. A lot of people use encrypted flash drives. I use a hardware encrypted flash drive, actually. So being able to have hardware encrypted storage is pretty cool. Use it as like a small hard drive. And then we're also shipping a seed vault where you can manage all your seeds for hot wallets, or maybe you have a family member that you want to create a seed for so that they can use, so you can manage all of that on device. So that's just a little preview of it. I'm sure we can dive, much more into the different aspects of it and how it's different from everyone else. But yeah, I'm really excited. It's called Passport Prime.
Yeah, I guess you could take a cue from Steve Jobs' presentation of the iPhone, and you say, today we're going to present a device that secures your keys, and another device that allows you to do encrypted storage, and another device that generates 2FA keys for your accounts, and then say, oh no, they're all in the same device.
I'm glad you said that, because we were thinking about doing that for the keynote, but decided not to, because we were worried that not enough people would get the reference, of showing the 3 items on screen and then, combining them. And I don't want to kind of rehash the same joke that's been made before, but it's a very similar narrative. And I'm glad you hit on that right away, because I think we're trying to follow a similar path from a strategy perspective as the iPhone, where you take a product category where there's multiple market leaders, yet has not achieved any kind of significant mass adoption. So back then it was the MP3 players. Not many people had, I should say, I'm actually going back to the iPod. So we can actually even go back further and talk about the iPod and looking at that. But with regard to the iPhone, you're taking devices that are disparate categories and you're combining them into a single device. You're kind of bundling all these different features together that are disparate hardware devices. And then after a period of time, several months, you introduce the SDK, the app platform, and you allow the capabilities to expand. So we're definitely following a similar approach with Passport Prime.
But I read your press release and you mentioned something about using an open source platform which is derived from something that was built by a hacker named Bunny.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's written in Rust or something?
Yeah, I have it here. So Bunny is a really cool, famous hardware hacker. And he does a lot of open source projects. And a couple of years ago, he introduced this project called Precursor or Be Trusted. And it actually looks a lot like almost like what you build for like an open source BlackBerry. And what he was trying to do was do the most hardcore secure communications device. And so like this thing doesn't even run a normal processor. It runs an FPGA, which simulates a RISC-V processor. So it's called a soft core, amusingly, because the code of the processor is all open source and it has a lot of cool features. And they built an operating system for it, which is not in any kind of, hasn't had any kind of mass adoption. It's still very much like a hobbyist, more enthusiast project that's in development. But the OS is called Zeus, XOUS. And it was Bunny and then someone he's working with named Zobs are the two guys that did it together. And it's a microkernel operating system written solely in Rust. And so microkernels are really interesting because it allows you to have a more modular, more resilient operating system. And a lot of people don't know that Google had been working on a microkernel operating system called Fuchsia that was supposed to replace Android and Chrome OS. And it seems like they may have paused or killed the project. But there's also been some really interesting developers working on microkernel OSs for desktop, like Jeremy Soller, who is at System 76 and has been building Redux, which is like a desktop, similar to like a Linux user interface, but a microkernel OS. So it's captivated a developer mindset for a long time. From our understanding, it's never been done in a consumer, device before. And it's a perfect environment for something that's more security heavy. So we started with this kind of hobbyist project operating system, and we became the number fifth and sixth, largest contributors on GitHub to the project. And we ported it from RISC-V to ARM because, all the kinds of chips that we can buy to put in a hardware wallet, the ones that meet our security standards, they're all ARM processors. So we had to, port the OS to ARM. And then we had to do a lot of cool stuff like add graphics, color graphics and that kind of thing, and build out all the apps for, the device's different functionalities. So we call our operating system Key OS. You can think of it as almost like the first ever distribution of Zeus, similar to how, you have Linux more as like the core operating system of the kernel, then you have like Ubuntu, and others. And we're really excited to have done that. What I was thinking is the first thing that, when we announce this, everyone's going to ask, who did we clone? Who did we copy? And I'm really excited that we have, kind of found a really great open source project and then significantly, built on it and are bringing a microkernel operating system to the consumer market for the first time.
I gotta congratulate you because it's remarkable that you're not following trends on the market. You don't seem to be consumed by what Ledger is doing, which seems to be more about becoming part of the mainstream and becoming a fashion item. You don't seem to be concerned with what Trezor is doing. You're just doing your own thing. And the haters will say, oh, you stole another idea from NVK or whatever. And they will find some podcast episode where he mentions RISC-V and say, oh, he listened to this and blah, blah. But
yeah,
seriously, it's pretty cool that you don't follow trends. I have another hardware wallet that's trying to achieve something similar. It's the Keystone. But that one is built on top of the Android platform.
Not anymore. The Keystone 3 is built on, I think, FreeRTOS or something like that, the newest one. But it was built on Android up until the latest one. So it's interesting. So we've been working on this product for 2 years. So that's the first thing. And so we started about 2 years ago, almost to the month. And we knew exactly what we wanted to build from day one. We didn't know what the exact shape would look like. We didn't necessarily know we wanted, this specific industrial design, but we knew we wanted something that was closer to the size of a credit card. We're not as small as that, but the 3.5-inch touchscreen we have is about credit card size. So, it's a pretty good form factor. And we knew exactly what features we wanted to have. And we knew we wanted to build this app platform. So the trends that have taken place over the last 2 years, it's been more of a relief for me, because by taking 2 years to bring this to market, and longer than I thought we could do it in like a year or so. So it took about double the time. We've been able to watch Coldcard come out with a new product, Trezor come out with the new safe products, the 3 and the 5, I believe, and then Ledger come out with the stacks. Have a really difficult time bringing that product to market, and then also coming out with the Flex, which is a little cheaper version of that product, still the secure touchscreen device. And so every single time one of these competitors' devices has been announced, we breathe like a sigh of relief within the company, because we're like, okay, thank God it's not anything like what we're building, and what we're building is still very different, and very opinionated. And so I think like a succinct summary of what most of the other hardware wallet companies are doing is Coldcard decided to add QR code support, and they, after saying they wouldn't, and they did it in a really weird, ginormous way.
And they added a camera after years of saying, it's not safe to add cameras. And they funded Seed Signer, which has a camera.
Yeah. But they said something like QR codes done right, trademark. And they use a Alibaba laser scanner camera module. And that's why the device is so thick. So that's a whole nother tangent we could go down. But I'm trying to distill it as much as possible, right? Effectively, Coldcard introduced same device as the Mark III, but bigger screen and camera, effectively, and QWERTY keyboard, right? So you have like the bigger screen, camera, QWERTY keyboard, otherwise same functionality. Then you have Trezor. I know you're a fan of Trezor. And I of all the companies in the space, I probably respect Trezor, the most, because they've stayed true to the open source mission. But their Safe 3 and 5 products, to me, feel like a light reskin, modernizing the previous products. Same form factor, same software, but bringing those products up to a more modern look and feel, right? You pick it up. If you pick up the Safe 5, it feels a little bit more modern, than the one that you have in front of you. But otherwise, it really is the same functionality. The only thing you're getting with the 5 is you're getting a secure element now.
I never felt compelled to upgrade because I don't need the secure element.
Right. And so then Ledger, I actually was very happy from a competitor perspective about seeing them launch stacks and Flex, so like call them the e-ink touchscreen devices, because what they basically did was they took the internals of the Nano devices, like the Nano X, which already did Bluetooth, and they plugged it in to a bigger screen. So the onboarding is the same, and except now they have Ledger Recover, which is crazy, in my opinion. I don't know, it's a horrible service. So the onboarding is the same though, and then the functionality is the same. All the Ledger users, they have a little bit of memory. They have to load on apps for all the different coins they use. They have to unload apps. They have to use Ledger Live for most stuff. You have to use Ledger Live really for firmware updates anyway, and that kind of thing. So you're within the ecosystem, and the device is just as slow as it always was. A little less frustrating to use because the screen is bigger and it's touch now, but it's basically the same experience that it's been for the last decade from a product perspective. And so I think that, in summary, innovation seems to have stalled in the hardware wallet space. And I personally think that we may look back on hardware wallets like we do the iPods, where you still might have people using iPod classics with the giant hard drive and the scroll wheel because they're enthusiasts of some kind. But if you look at the total adoption of hardware wallets right now amongst crypto users, we think it's about 2.5%, which is like we've barely even started. And so I think this new device that we're launching, Passport Prime, is our way of saying we want to go beyond that. We don't think that this is a category that is going to continue growing. And we think that we need a new category to reach the next, 10 million, 100 million users, as opposed to the hardware wallet users where maybe it's like 10 to 15 million total devices sold over the last decade.
Yeah, so you said the C word, which is crypto, in the context
Yes,
of a company that promised to stay Bitcoin only. We can talk about that. Let me plug a couple of sponsors first.
Yeah.
And then I can trash talk you from the point of view
Good.
of an intolerant, toxic Bitcoin maximalist who eats steaks and doesn't tolerate anything with the C word, So speaking of the C word, there's Sideshift.ai, which allows you to swap any coin for Bitcoin. Basically, whatever has liquidity. But my recommendation, and this is not financial advice, but it's simply a fact of life. We're in a bull market. Don't hold on to stable coins. If someone offers to pay you in USDT, USDC, or whatever, just swap that CBDC wannabe for free market money of your choice. I'm not going to tell you just buy Bitcoin. You can buy whatever you want. It's a free world. It's a free market. You get to choose whatever you want, and the fees are pretty low and the liquidity is great. Unfortunately, I don't think it works in the US anymore due to regulations, but maybe now that there's going to be a new administration, they will be able to function again. So check out Sideshift.ai. And even if it's not available in the US, I guess you can use VPN, but I'm not going to tell you to do that. No, don't break the law. Be nice. And there's also Nuance, which is a new sponsor to the show. They're trying, I guess Ray Youssef, and he has been in the past the CEO of Paxful, and he's been obsessed for longer than a decade with this idea of onboarding the global south and trying to basically increase the purchasing power and get these people whom he calls lions to integrate them into the global economy. And the way that he does it is with Bitcoin and a couple of other cryptos, I think Litecoin and Monero. And they are able to buy gift cards because these are very liquid and in high demand. And basically you can join this economy and buy and sell gift cards to these people and support the global south and also make some money from fees. It's pretty interesting. It's an exchange like no other, which also preserves your anonymity. Check it out. It's nuance.com, and it's a pretty cool peer-to-peer marketplace for your coins. And now, Zach, let's roast you for not being Bitcoin only anymore, because I read the press release and you're going to have an integration with Cake Wallet, which is going to allow users to access Monero.
That's correct. I was hoping that you'd forget about it when you did the ad read and just go on to a different topic. No, I'm just kidding. Couple things here. So one is Foundation is still and has always been, as I describe it, a Bitcoin-centric company. So I think that's really important to me as a Bitcoiner. I'm a self-described Bitcoiner, and I have been for I guess over a decade now, which is crazy to say. But I think that we need to empower anyone to do what they want with the hardware. And that is part of our journey to not build yet another hardware wallet, but instead to build this personal security platform, right? And the whole point of the platform is that what we're doing with Passport Prime is making an open platform that is polar opposite to Ledger's closed platform. So like with Ledger, if you want to make an app, apps are really only I'm not aware of any app on the Ledger, any third-party party app on a Ledger device that is not a coin, right? Because they have the apps, they have all these different coins that you can install onto your device. And then they have a couple Ledger first-party apps that are not coins, but they don't have any third-party apps. And so it's a very limited environment. If you want to integrate with Ledger as a developer, you are stuck with whatever they give you from an SDK perspective. So Cake Wallet is a great example because they have Ledger integrated on their mobile app, but they cannot get Monero to work with Ledger. And so it's the perfect example of this idea that I think Ledger is holding back the ecosystem, because what I want to do is I want to empower every single wallet and service to add cold storage easily. And if you're a wallet and you want to add cold storage, most of them will just go to Ledger's SDK, and it's a really bad experience, and you cannot customize anything that the Ledger device shows on the screen, and you're stuck in this very restrictive walled garden paradigm, and the app for the coins can only be distributed through Ledger Live. So, very restrictive. And the device is so slow, and it uses legacy smart card tech. And so that's why you have to load an app, unload an app, you open an app, you close an app. There's not enough memory for anything. So it's just an overall very frustrating experience, not only for users, but especially for the developers. Developers are always complaining about Ledger, yet they all use Ledger because it's the only thing that's kind of I call it a quasi platform. Okay. So what we want to do is say anyone can come make an app to run on KeyOS. Now, you're welcome to distribute it next year through our Envoy app. We're gonna have an app catalog where you can easily, install apps onto your Passport Prime, but you're also welcome to just distribute it to your user base without our permission. And that is so cool, because hopefully if we can do a good job building up this developer ecosystem, every single wallet, right? Every single service, or even beyond just the Bitcoin or crypto space, anyone that wants to add or improve functionalities, maybe someone wants to build a SSH signing app, a PGP signing app, something that natively integrates with GitHub, so you can sign your own code releases without your keys leaving, the device, right? So there's all these different kinds of security, capabilities and features. But yeah, I want to onboard everyone. I want to onboard the entire ecosystem, both Bitcoin, crypto, and beyond. Our Envoy app is still providing a distilled Bitcoin experience, kind of like a simplified Bitcoin software wallet as a companion to Passport Prime as the personal security platform. And Envoy will stay, Bitcoin focused and very kind of simple and Zen-like in the features, but we want to onboard everyone. So I wouldn't phrase it as, oh, we're no longer Bitcoin only. I would phrase it as we haven't built a hardware wallet, we've built a platform.
Yeah, so basically, let me be the hater who says this before you get this on Twitter. You could no longer compete with Coldcard because they're so excellent at being Bitcoin only, and they are the ones that manage to stay pure. So you decided to support every shitcoin out there because you're building a platform. And what else is there to say here? I guess this is your way of acknowledging that you've lost the battle and you can't compete with Coldcard.
I would like to say something more provocative, which is I think the entire hardware wallet industry is losing the battle because the adoption is terrible. Ledger announced when they launched Stacks almost 2 years ago, when they announced it on stage, that they had sold, I believe, 7 million total devices. So that means 7 million over the last decade. When they shipped Stacks, actually more specifically, when they shipped Stacks and when they announced Flex at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville earlier this year, I believe they still said 7 million devices. So bear market Ledger has not cracked 1 million units over a year and a half. And then Trezor, they have not specifically said how many units, but they've said over 1 million. So my guess is we're somewhere in an 80-20 split between Ledger and Trezor. Maybe Ledger is around 8 million, maybe Trezor is around 2 million, and then everyone else is fighting for tiny scraps. Cold Card fighting for tiny scraps, Bitbox, Foundation, and we may have great products. I would argue Passport is the best Bitcoin-only hardware wallet. And the camera, the QR codes, the air-gapped experience, it actually works really well with your mobile phone, and it just provides a really streamlined, simple, user experience. Now, we're continuing to sell Passport, so we're not replacing the Bitcoin-only hardware wallet, but we are introducing this higher-tier platform product that we hope will be able to onboard hundreds and then thousands of different companies as developers, right? Making apps for the platform to integrate with their existing wallets, services, security products, and so on. And then also hopefully scale to millions and tens of millions of users. So this is almost our way of trying to leapfrog Ledger, leapfrog Yubikey, right? And put something that has much larger market potential. So I don't know if that's how you expected me to answer, but I think the hardware wallet space, like we're so stuck in it as ultra early adopters. We're not even at that area, and I say in the keynote, we're not even in the area where you cross the chasm of like technology adoption. That's when you get to like 10-15% adoption. We're like stuck in the ultra early 2.5%. Barely anyone uses these products, and then within and that's Ledger and Trezor. And then you shrink down to like the bottom 10% of the market, which is like the cold cards, Passports, Bitboxes, Jades, right, and others. And you have like NVK flinging, mud at everyone. And I don't really know where that product line goes. I don't see that product could never sell 1 million units. Like it's just, I don't ever see that happening. And so
I guess that's also the reason why he creates annual iterations. He's like,
yes,
Mark 2, Mark 3, Mark 4, get the new whatever, Q1 or something.
But also, I think why he creates so much drama, because that is the marketing, right? You create a lot of drama. You each year you choose a new competitor to kind of hit on, and you use your existing platform to do that. That's great, but that's not going to turn, the cold card product line into some enormously successful product line that enables millions of people to attain self-custody. It's just not going to happen. And so we have much grander ambitions, and we think that the way to scale and leapfrog Ledger is to go for the platform approach.
Something interesting about Ledger is that for a long time they had this factory in Vierzon or something in France.
Mm-hmm. In France.
And they manufactured their own chips, and they also had very close supervision of their devices when they left the factory.
Yeah.
And recently I saw some pictures of Ledgers being manufactured in Hungary, which is interesting. And I saw some conspiracy theories from people saying, those pagers that exploded in the pockets of Hamas people. Was it Hamas? I don't want to make a horrible
It was
mistake.
Hezbollah. And Lebanon. Yeah.
I'm happy I asked. Those pagers were also made in Hungary, so I saw some people trying to connect the dots and say, oh no, Ledger sold out or something. But recently their Stacks devices are partly made in China, if I'm not mistaken, especially their e-ink screens or something.
Slight clarification, but I got packaging right here for the Flex, so you can just read the box. So designed in France, made in Vietnam. And that's what it says on the box. And so they're not made in China, they're made in Vietnam, and specifically they're made by Foxconn. So then all the newest gen Ledger devices, the secure touchscreen devices, the Flex and the Stacks are no longer made in France. They're not even made in Europe. They're now outsourced to Foxconn completely, and they're made in Asia.
Yeah, and this is where I have to ask, is Foundation still producing its devices in the US?
Of course.
And why? Because you could be, I guess, getting better margins if you outsource the production somewhere else.
It's purely selfish. I would never buy any kind of hardware wallet like product that was made in China or Asia, or specifically made by Foxconn, right? I don't want Foxconn provisioning the device and building the circuit boards and assembling it and everything like that. I think for me, there's a security and trustability aspect to that. I think what happened with Ledger was they didn't really know what to do for the next gen devices. They brought in external help. They brought in Tony Fadell, who created the iPod with Steve Jobs, and then made Nest, those smart thermostats. And then after he sold Nest to Google, he does, consulting, investment, that kind of thing. And so they have made him a key part of the company. And I think what happened is Tony came in and said, well, you guys want to sell hundreds of millions of these, you got to go to Foxconn, just like Apple does. And so I think what happened is Ledger went to Foxconn because their advisors told them to. And then they created a device where the only real differentiator was this curved e-ink, which, if you look at the case for the stacks with the curved e-ink, the case covers up the curved e-ink. It's like, so it doesn't even make any sense. And it's the curved e-ink is what delayed the device by over a year. So I think they got some bad advice. They brought in like the designers, the former, Apple designers.
Yeah,
like, you got to go to Foxconn.
There's more to it because they manufactured in Vietnam, as you say. I thought it was China, but it's not cheaper. So when you buy it as a consumer, it's pretty high end. It's supposed to be, I don't know, maybe it's marketed as this fashion item and they're aiming for that sort of audience. But for the longest time, Ledger was successful because the Nano OS was so damn accessible. You could get it for like $50. And now they basically increased the price of admission to like $300, $400. I remember I wanted to get one in Nashville and I wanted to pay in Bitcoin. And they told me they can't accept Bitcoin payments and I have to use my credit card. And I was like, bye, Felicia. No, thank you.
Yeah, they the stacks, they increased the price to $399 because I think they've had so many manufacturing issues with the curved e-ink, trying to get the manufacturing yields correct. My guess is that they throw out a lot of defective screens. And my guess is that they may even phase out stacks over the next year or two, and that maybe they priced it so high as a premium kind of fashion product, and they're going to see who buys it and evaluate. Ironically, the Flex is a $249, and it seems to me a better device than stacks. It's not as slim, but the e-ink display has a faster refresh rate because it's not a custom e-ink display. Stacks is a fully custom curved e-ink panel that they probably have to spend many millions of dollars to develop with e-ink. Flex is a stock e-ink panel. And so that's how they were able to get it to market so fast. So you can think of Flex as like the rescue device because they were struggling with stacks manufacturing. And that's $249. I think $249 for Flex is a decent price point. But you're right that the manufacturing costs should be coming down. Yet the prices are going up. And for stacks, I mean, $399 is a pretty significant price.
What about the new Foundation devices hardware wallet? How much is that one going to cost? And I know that you also have this subscription model to a service, and I guess you're going to be paying a monthly fee for that.
Yeah, and that's totally optional. So Passport Prime is $299, which sits nicely, I think, between Flex and stacks if you're looking at that. But if you start to compare the cost of the different devices that Passport Prime is replacing, I think it looks like a pretty good deal. So if you look at the hardware wallet type device that you can expand, functionality with, you maybe would compare it to something like like Ledger Flex, that's at $249. Or even if you want to compare it to the current gen Passport, that's $199. And then you add in 2 YubiKeys, because you can never just buy one YubiKey, because there's no way to back up a YubiKey. So most people buy 2 YubiKeys, and oftentimes services will actually require that you connect 2 YubiKeys because they want to have one as a backup. So like if you ever try to do Apple's enhanced data protection for the iPhones, where you can enable end-to-end encrypted security for your iCloud account, you have to connect 2 YubiKeys. You're not allowed to continue with just one. So now if you do 2 YubiKeys, maybe you do one with a fingerprint, one without, you're probably at like $150 for that, which is crazy. YubiKeys have gotten extremely expensive. It's like $80, $90 for the YubiKey with the fingerprint, scanner on it. And then if you want to throw on like an encrypted flash drive with hardware encryption with like a keypad on it, which like I use, and I know a lot of security-minded people use, that's another around $100 if you go on Amazon, $80 to $100 for like, call it 50, 60 gigs of storage. So you add all that up, you're looking at, comparing our $299 to, something like $400 or $500, maybe even $600, depending on what you get worth of products. And then Passport Prime has the ability to expand its functionality, right, with third-party apps. And so I think that's kind of how we, justify the price point. I think it's a pretty good price for all the different things that you're getting for it.
Yeah, it's interesting that right now you're not just competing with existing hardware wallets, but you're also going after YubiKey, which I think for the longest time has been the industry standard. And I don't think you ever consider getting something cheaper than the YubiKey, because it's so reliable, it's so well known. I don't think you want to compromise for $10 or something to get a cheaper device. But now you're going to be able to get something which is maybe a bit more premium and integrates the functions of a YubiKey. And as you said, you can have backups. So how does that work?
Yeah, so that's the optional subscription service that we're going to be launching, called Envoy Plus. It's not going to launch until mid or late 2025. And so everyone who buys a Passport Prime will get a free 6-month trial for Envoy Plus. And if you're one of the 1,000 people who decide to buy an early access edition of Passport Prime, which is the first 1,000 devices, we're giving you a lifetime subscription to Envoy Plus. So Envoy Plus is our upcoming subscription service. As of right now, it's all about backups. So I'll actually show you, the packaging is really nice for Passport Prime. It's very like Apple style in the sense that you got the perfect tension when you lift the cover. You have the device front and center, and then you have a few cards and other items alongside the USB-C cable. And with the cards, we actually are providing these really cool NFC key cards for your backups. And so this is a Faraday sleeve that is custom designed. You can even write a label on the back. Then we have the card itself that's custom designed NFC cards. And they're specifically designed to work with Passport Prime's NFC antenna, which is beneath the glass on the back. It's really cool. So it's all aluminum, but then we have this glass on the back and the NFC antenna is underneath. And so when you set it up, we're by default doing Shamir, which is pretty cool. I know Trezor has that as an option and has had that for some time. We may be the second, major ones that are doing Shamir now. But what we're doing is if you opt into it, we're doing a 2 of 3 Shamir, and 2 of the shares go on the included card. So these are in the box. You don't pay extra for this. The 3rd Shamir share goes on the Envoy app on your phone. So if you lose your Passport Prime, all you have to do is tap one of the cards to the device, and then it grabs the 2nd share from the Envoy app on your phone, and then it's able to repiece the seed, back together and restore the device. Now, what our subscription service allows you to do with Magic Backups, as we call it, is the device takes an encrypted backup of all of the metadata and settings. So not the seed words, which is a huge controversy with something like Ledger Recover, but basically on Passport Prime itself, right, it does a encrypted backup, and it encrypts the backup with the seed. And then it sends the backup through our Envoy to Foundation servers. So the subscription is essentially paying us, it'll be $5 a month to store this backup for you. And we'll add more and more functionality and advanced features over time. So it's like iCloud Backup and Recover, but for Passport Prime. So like right now, if you lose your ledger or something, you have to, figure out how to enter those seed words in. If you have one of the older devices with the 2 buttons, you want to kill yourself trying to enter the seed words. And then you have to set it all up again from scratch. Now, Passport Prime is going to have so much functionality. You're going to have 2FA codes on here, 6-digit 2FA codes it supports actually. So you can, secure like your most important online accounts with 6-digit 2FA codes. You're going to have security keys. And it's not just one Yubikey style security key. You can have more than one security key, and you can label them. So you can have one for work, one for personal. You can basically, segregate your security keys. You're going to have seeds on here, and then you're going to have all the data that the other third-party apps store on there. So this is going to allow you to back all of that up automatically. And then the way to restore it is you just tap one of the key cards to it, and everything comes back to normal. So by default, no seed words, tap 2 cards during setup. Everything is automatically backed up and set up for you. And if you lose the device, you just download that encrypted blob of data. It's decrypted locally on device. We don't even know who you are. So if you're using Tor and Envoy, it all happens through Tor. There's no user ID. The hash of your seed is actually the user ID, which is really cool. And we don't have any other data about you. So we're just storing like a seed hash and an encrypted blob. So that is the backup service.
That's actually what I was going to ask you, because for the longest time, I think the Passport hardware wallet has appealed to, I think it was very popular among Samurai wallet users. And this privacy crowd seemed to very much appreciate it. And if you're going to have a subscription service, it's a bit tricky because it's like KYCing your customers. You're gonna be wanting to know exactly who they are, provide to them service and stuff like this, not service, support. And how are they going to be able to pay for it? Because that's a very tricky element. If they pay by credit card, then of course you're gonna know their full name and which bank they're using.
It's easy. So, and this is why we're not going to be able to roll out the paid subscription until later in the year. So us doing a free trial is both because A, we want our users to all have a free trial, and B, because we need to figure out the private payment side of things. And what we're going to be doing is, yes, we'll know that you're a paying customer for the subscription, right? We'll have, a database that has, your email address and did you pay, and you just pay on the website. You'll be able to pay either monthly or you'll be able to pay for like a year at a time, right, with credit card or Bitcoin on our website. But we're going to have a way of giving you a code that allows you to kind of redeem that code for the subscription without us being able to connect the email to the code to the actual subscription. It's probably going to be some kind of zero knowledge library that we use on the back end. And so we'll know that someone's a paying user, but we won't know if we go look in the server and we see the list of seed hashes and encrypted blobs of data. All we'll know is that either yes, they're paid, or no, they're not. And we won't know anything about being able to correlate it to any kind of email address or payment method. So it's actually really cool. And I'm excited for that because it helps solidify our reputation as a company that is able to provide beautifully designed, easy to use products while also trying to do everything we can to preserve, user privacy without compromising on the user experience.
That's actually pretty cool. I'm not aware of any other hardware wallet company that's trying to do this.
And by the way, because we have some very privacy-minded individuals on the team, we do ship you a third key card. So you actually get 3 of these NFC key cards with the Faraday sleeve. So there's no pressure at all to do any kind of backup service. If you want to manage the backups yourself, you can actually plug a flash drive or an SD card adapter into Passport Prime. Passport Prime can read and write from external storage, which is really cool, similar to how a phone or a computer can. And you can take manual, fully encrypted backups on whatever cadence you want, on your device. So if you want to pop in a flash drive, you pull an encrypted backup, and then you could do a 2 of 3 Shamir with the 3 cards. So you don't need to use that third Shamir share on Envoy. You don't need to use the service. You can still get an amazing 2 of 3 Shamir card offering, tap, tap, tap during setup, and you're done. We think, though, that for most people, they're going to want to use the service because it alleviates so many concerns they have about, like, what happens if they lose their, device? How do they get all the data back onto it? And the other reason we've had to spend a lot more time on this than other companies is because of how much data is being stored on here. Like, you're using your Trezor as a stateless device. You're almost using it like a seed signer, where you're wiping it each time. This is not something that we're going to be able to do with Passport Prime, because the whole point is you have all of your most important data on here, right? You have your security keys. You may have pass keys in the future, or like password management features. You have important seeds. You have 2FA codes, and we can't even foresee what third-party developers are going to do. So we needed to find a way where we can actually back all of this up, where you have like an iCloud recover experience if you lose it, while still preserving your privacy. And it's like really hard to do that. And we wanted to do something without any physical cards. You see companies that are rolling out options where, maybe it could be based on social recovery, right? Maybe it could be based on something else like that. But without a physical tether, it's really difficult to do that without putting trust in the mobile app or the server. And so we decided, let's go with the cards. You get your physical tether. You can keep one at home. You could keep one somewhere else. You kind of have that redundancy, but you also get the features of like the mobile companion app and the server to help make things automatic and convenient for you.
Yeah, that's really impressive, honestly. It's good that you went to this length and you seem to have most of it figured out. Mm-hmm. I also want to ask you about what part of the device is open source and what isn't, or sure, if it's 100% open source. But before that, I got to plug the other 2 sponsors of this episode. Hodling.ch is a service from Switzerland that will help you with your self-custody setup. It's actually tangential to this new Passport hardware wallet because they provide advice on whether or not you should use a hardware wallet at all, depending on your threat model. Of course, there's that Swiss confidentiality from which you benefit. And depending on what you want to do, for example, if you're a company that wants to start buying Bitcoin, or you're a whale that has no idea how to keep the keys out of the house, but in a way that does not lock themselves out, they're going to provide to you this customized experience, and tell you what you should be using, if you should go for a multi-sig, or if you should have this multi-hardware wallet setup, and so on. So check out hodling.ch. And they also deal with key recovery. So if you for some reason mix up your seed phrase words or lose a couple of them, they can still help you recover. And of course, they're going to take a fee for that. So check out hodling.ch. And last but not least, we have Layer 2 Labs, which is the company started by Paul Stortz. He's trying to bring side chains that are enforced by miners to Bitcoin, so that every use case that you see in altcoins today is going to become available on Bitcoin using BTC, the currency. And it's not just a theory. It's not just an idea. You can actually download software from the website. You go to layer2labs.com/download, and you can actually run an Ethereum sidechain, a Zcash sidechain for fungibility, a big block sidechain that's ironically called Thunder. And I think there's also something else for assets like Namecoin. and you can see how they interact with each other on the Bitcoin testnet. And it's pretty cool. It gives you an idea of how this can play out and whether or not you should consider supporting this for Bitcoin. So layer2labs.com/download. And now, Zach, let's talk about open sourcing everything or just parts of the Prime hardware wallet. Is there any security element or something inside of it that is not 100% auditable, or did you choose to go 100% open source this time?
Yeah, so I'll start with the software. So KeyOS, our operating system, which is the Rust microkernel OS, is fully open source. And the way we like to do things at Foundation is when we announce products ahead of time, we make sure that by the time they're shipping, the code is all on GitHub. And so that'll be the case. Same thing. We'll be using a combination of several licenses like we always do when you're bringing in, working with code from many different places, but it will be governed by GPL, just like our current device. And so it'll be a copyleft license. And so anyone is welcome to build on KeyOS, fork it, use it, but then they would have to make their code open source as well. On the hardware side, it's a little more complicated, but most of the answer is yes. The like always before, the hardware design files will be fully open source. We're one of the only ones that open sources the chassis, the circuit board. It's actually a really complex circuit board in Passport Prime, way more complex than what you'd see, in other devices like Ledger or Trezor. All of that will be open source under the Open Hardware License, OHL. And then if you look at the individual chips, we're using different chips than what we did on the current gen Passport. So we're using a Microchip is the company. So a Microchip security MPU microprocessor with ARM Trust Zone that's specifically designed for security applications. It's the same kind of chip that's commonly used in credit card readers and payment terminals and that kind of thing. And has some really cool features like active tamper. So we have tamper switches on the device. If you try to open it, it'll wipe itself. That chip does not have any, black box code running on it. So that is the chip that's running KeyOS. So rather than using some existing OS, right, we decided to write it all. And so it's running on the security processor. Different from Ledger Secure Element, right, where it's all closed source. So instead, it's like security MPU microprocessor running at 500 megahertz, which is about 6 times faster than Ledger's Secure Element, and it's running KeyOS. Then we have still a Microchip 608 series Secure Element, which is what's used on Passport today, used in Cold Card, used I think in Bitbox as well, and that has no code running on it, right? So it's like a dumb Secure Element. It just has slots and timers that we use for key storage, just very similar to how Cold Card and Bitbox and current gen Passport uses it. So there's no code that's actually executing on that chip. Then we have a couple new chips on Passport Prime. We have, as I mentioned, NFC, which I don't believe has any black box code. It's all just open source code running on the NFC chip, which is allowing us to both read NFC tags, which some devices have, like Cold Card, has NFC, and you can like read a tag basically. But we actually have the ability to power up and write to tags, which is how we're writing to the card. So it's very cool with a custom NFC antenna that we designed. And then we have the maybe most polarizing aspect of the device that we haven't talked about yet, which maybe just as polarizing as not being Bitcoin only in functionality, which is we have Bluetooth on Passport Prime. And there's a bunch of different hardware wallets that offer Bluetooth. One of the downsides is it does have some blobs of code that are closed source, that are native to the Bluetooth stack. And there's nothing we can do about that. So we did something really cool with the Bluetooth stack. Different from how Ledger does it, very different from how like Jade does it or other devices like that, where the Bluetooth is part of the processor. A lot of these devices with Bluetooth use something like an ESP32 processor, where the processor itself also has Bluetooth on it. That's terrifying to me, because that means the thing that's running your operating system or firmware is also the thing that has some kind of black box code in it. And you hear Bluetooth, a lot of people kind of cringe. A lot of security-minded people instantly get concerned. That was me as well. That's why we did passport air gapped for 2 generations of hardware. But what we did is we actually put a Bluetooth chip on a separate chip from the processor, and we have still a camera on Passport Prime. And so the first thing you do when you go to set up Passport Prime is you do a QR scan with a QR code shown on the display. And we establish in an air-gapped way, we exchange encryption keys with the phone. So all communication going through Bluetooth has already been encrypted. It's been encrypted on the processor side running POS, or it's been encrypted on the Envoy app that you're communicating with. And so the Bluetooth chip is stuck in the middle, and it's just passing messages. It's passing encrypted blobs of data. It's either passing it from your smartphone to the processor running POS, or it's passing it from the processor running POS to your smartphone, and it can't do anything because it's just passing encrypted blobs, and everything has to be signed. So if our processor gets something that's not signed, then it's not gonna receive it. It's not gonna open it. And so the Bluetooth chip, we've almost like created an encrypted tunnel through the chip. And so yes, it has a little bit of some blobs of code. It is Bluetooth, but we're calling this quantum link Bluetooth. It's our own protocol, and it uses post-quantum encryption tech actually to do the end-to-end encryption, which is kind of cool. It's like the best encryption we know how to use, and it in my opinion, it gives the security of an air gap while having the convenience of Bluetooth. So that's the only bit of non-open source code, is living somewhere deep in that Bluetooth stack.
Yeah, so I have to ask you, because you have 2 previous generations of hardware, for how long is Foundation going to support the Passport 1 and 2 with software updates and also with support?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know if we have an answer for that, except that it's very ingrained in the company culture to continue supporting the products. So when we introduced Passport Gen 2, we sold way more Passport Gen 2s, right, than the 1,000 Founders Edition passports. Yet, for whatever reason, we decided to bring the new UI from Passport Gen 2 back to Founders Edition, which was a huge exercise because it has a monochrome screen on Founders Edition, and it has a color screen on Gen 2. So we had to do all this stuff to like adapt the UI and bring it back. But we did it because we wanted those early customers to have the best possible experience. And so I think it's hard for me to just commit to something like on the podcast, but years for sure, if not like a decade, right? We want to support it as long as possible, and we also don't want to be the kind of company that alienates our earliest fans. I think that's something you see a lot. You see companies get the hardcore users are really excited, and the company grows, it gets more and more adoption, and then it kind of just pisses off, and the hardcore early users or makes terrible decisions. We don't want to be like that, right? And so we want to make sure that if you want to use Passport Founders Edition, if you want to use Passport Gen 2, we're still selling Gen 2. We're still going to be selling it into probably end of 2025 at least. But we also want to see what the market does. We want to see what's the breakdown is going to be in sales between Passport Prime and Passport, between the platform and the Bitcoin-only hardware wallet. And we'll kind of adapt our plans. Maybe we'll do a refresher of Passport that's still air-gapped, Bitcoin-only, for example.
Is there going to be any sort of price drop for the Passport 2 now that there's a new hardware?
No, we actually have done a pretty good job bringing the prices down. If you recall, Passport Founders Edition was $299. And then we launched Passport Gen 2 at $249. And then we ultimately brought it down to $199 as we scaled up production. And we were able to save costs and figure out how to make some of these parts and assemble them more efficiently. $199 is already, I think, the lowest we can go in order to achieve any kind of decent margin with U.S. manufacturing. So it's we pay more to make it in the U.S. and Passport Prime at $299 I think is a really good price point. Unfortunately, too, like the whole industry has been hit with inflation, and I've seen Trezor raise their prices with inflation. Notably, we've kept Passport at $199, even during the last year. And Passport Prime, we hope to never increase that price either. Maybe we would do like a second higher tier. Maybe someone wants like 256 gigs of storage or something like that, right? And we have like a higher tier if you really want to use it more as like a full-on hard drive experience. But I think $299 for Passport Prime and $199 for Passport is where it's going to stay. I would love to be able to do a lower cost device though as well in the next year or two. That would be pretty cool. But our entire focus right now is getting this to market and then also building out the developer ecosystem.
When we did our previous interview 3.5 years ago, you hinted that you might be looking into building a sovereign mobile phone with Foundation.
That's still the dream.
Oh, is that still part of the plan?
Yeah. So QoS, well, there's different ways to approach the mobile phone and just to approach the computing stack in general. The way that you see almost everyone do it is going with Android, which probably makes sense, right? Like it's smart. It has support for all the apps. If you wanted to, you could do something on maybe based on graphene instead of like the Google Android. And I know the graphene folks really want a like a phone that they could recommend and have first class support that's separate from the Pixel devices, which are the only devices that they can have support for. But I mean, maybe that's something we'll do in the coming years, because I think it would still be an amazing product, and you could bake in some like security platform functionality into it. For example, you could probably put like the internals of this like into a phone and have it live side by side. It'd be pretty cool. You kind of flip into security mode or something like that. So definitely interested in that. But we also have grander plans just for QoS as an operating system. Right now, there are not many good options for next-gen embedded security operating systems or just security-oriented operating systems. There's a reason why Passport, Trezor, Cold Card are all on MicroPython. It's not the best for security, though. It's like not designed for security from the ground up. And then there's a reason why Ledger is on smart card tech, which is like 30-year-old tech right now. It's because it's just like it's a secure environment. It's also why Ledger can never open source everything, because they're like using all this like highly NDA. I don't even think Ledger knows all the code on their device, by the way. That's my guess. My guess is there's like smart card code baked into that even they're not privy to. That's built on legacy, decades of smart card development, and it's very proprietary. And so then you have like embedded Linux, which is really not designed well for security either, but is like the most popular thing on a lot of these like embedded devices. Then you have maybe some Android, like you mentioned, like Keystone used Android, or you have like FreeRTOS or other stuff like that. We think QoS could scale. Like there's nothing that would stop us from scaling QoS to bring it to larger screen sizes, different categories of devices, and maybe even grow it into like a real, operating system that could rival Linux and iOS and, Android and the others. That's a much longer journey. But like when we think about what we're doing, we think about that stuff. It's important. It's important when you're building a new operating system even when you're building it just to run on a single device, that you're thinking about like what you want to do with it over a longer period of time. I mean, I would love to do a phone. And what's really cool too is like this thing is only running at 500 megahertz. Your phone runs at like multiple gigahertz and has numerous cores. I don't know how many cores are in an iPhone now, like 6, 12, you know, the Apple, the A series chips, you know, so many cores, a massive amount of compute packed into this. This is like an order of magnitude slower, but everything is fast. It's like what you'd expect on a smartphone. And the reason is it's bare metal Rust code running on it. So we're kind of like building everything from the ground up again. It's going to take years to bring it to like, you know, more powerful devices, bigger screen sizes. And obviously we have to sell a lot of these in order to finance, you know, those R&D efforts internally, of course. But like, if we're able to do it, it's a really cool operating system. I think people are going to be really impressed with the performance of it. They're going to forget that they're using like a 500 megahertz security processor. It feels a lot closer to your iPhone than it does to like, you know, a hardware wallet that you might be used to today.
Well, there's a lot to be said about optimization, because when you develop the software around the hardware, you're going to be able to do some very cool stuff. And sometimes I'm frustrated in day-to-day life because today we have very powerful hardware, but it seems like the programmers forgot how to code properly. I remember I had this Pentium 1 that was running pretty much every game I could get, you know, with certain limitations, but I could run Doom, I could run Quake. And it's just because these programmers knew very well how to optimize for existing machines. But nowadays, it seems like they take for granted the fact that you might have a last generation processor with a lot of storage and an expensive video card. And even in that case, you get a lot of glitches and you need to update it. And it seems like they're just lazy and they make everything resource intensive. Even I don't use Windows anymore, but I hear that Windows 11 is horrible.
Yeah. The layers of abstraction that developers are building on, I think, has made it so that like most of these apps are more like web apps that are running in a browser environment in some way that are then running on the computer. And so they're soaking up gigabytes of memory, and the developers are so far separated from the more bare metal code. There's so many layers above that they're just trying to build apps and get things to market, you know, as fast as possible. And it seems like the hardware is increasing massively in performance, yet the performance of the apps is either staying stagnant or even decreasing, which is kind of insane. One of my co-founders and our CTO, Ken, we talk about this all the time, and we've been talking about this for years. It's been our dream, actually, to build a device with a new operating system like this. We've been talking about doing microkernel operating system because we thought that that was an ideal way to do a security device. We've been talking about that since end of 2020, like the same year we started the company. And so, well, we wanted to do a phone back then, you know, like we had talked about as well. We still do, but you have to like build from the ground up. And what we realized with Passport Prime is that if you're doing a new operating system, you can like, and you want it to actually work and you want to get it to market within a couple of years, which is what we're doing, which I think is a pretty awesome feat for a team that's less than 20 people. You have to build it for a specific hardware device. So like, because every single component on this device needs a driver. Everything. The LEDs on the home button here, right, need a driver. The ambient light sensor so that the screen can auto adjust the brightness needs a driver. We have a haptic motor in here so that when you tap the home button and actually you feel the tap, really, really nice tap. That needs a driver. So like everything needs a driver. And then the Bluetooth stack, the NFC, right? And so our team is writing most of this stuff from scratch in Rust. If we said we want to make a new operating system and we want it to support like your computer, which is what that project I mentioned, Redox, is doing by Jeremy Soller. It's been like a 5-year project already, maybe more, and it's probably gonna be another 5-10 years before it supports like everything, all the different drivers that your computer supports, because there's thousands of different motherboards and processors and peripherals and all the stuff that you just take for granted is supported on the Linux computer or the Windows computer, right, or the Mac computer. But like we literally had to do it just for one device, like one set of drivers. But now that we've done it, it's going to be easier to build more, and more and more. So I'm really excited about that. And I think we're the only ones that have, in the whole industry, that have made a new operating system. The last one to kind of do an operating system as being a core part of the new device was probably Ledger, building on a smart card environment and calling it Bolos and having the ability to load in these apps which represented coins. So I think it's been like a decade since anyone in the space has done an operating system to go along with the hardware.
If Tropic Square, which is this company by Trezor, is going to come out with this open source security chip, is Foundation going to use that, or are you going to stick to the hardware that you already have?
We're definitely open to integrating new components that are better and more open, like for sure. So I believe we've talked to them a couple times. It's something that is on our radar, and I think the promises of that specific project are not living up to what is going to ship. I'm only saying this based on public available information, but I believe when they first started the project, they said it would be fully open source. But there's no way to make a fully open source chip. They may have components of the chip that are open source, but there are going to be things on the chip that are not. So that may be, though, better than what we have from existing suppliers, and that's great. But I don't think it will achieve the goal of being 100% open source. If you wanted to do 100% open source secure element, I think the only way you'd be able to do it right now is if you went to a foundry in the US called Skywater that has been cooperating with Google to make their 130 nanometer and 90 nanometer chip processes fully open source. So you could go make a 90 nanometer chip at Skywater maybe, and you could barely use it for anything. You could use it for like some slots to store keys on or something like that. So it wouldn't replace like the processor that's used, but it maybe could replace that microchip 608 series secure element. But no one's doing that. I think what the guys at Tropic Square are doing is more like a processor. My guess is that they're trying to replace the processor that's on Trezor devices with this Tropic Square component, but it's not going to be like a panacea. There are going to be parts of it that are still closed.
Yeah, I think the first iteration of the chip is still going to require a microcontroller alongside it. So it's not going to be able to handle processing and interesting stuff. It will just be this security chip that is pretty dumb. But they're already working, as far as I know, on a second iteration that's going to be this all-in-one chip that includes everything that you might need in the context of a hardware wallet. But still, I remember when the news broke like 4 years ago, I got super excited, but it's a slow process. And there's still, if everything went according to plans, they're still in the testing phase. And maybe next year they're going to come up with the first market prototype.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think what they're doing is completely worthwhile, and I think it's important. And so we're definitely open to incorporating something like that if it comes to market and it's more open and it doesn't have any significant, performance trade-offs, especially if it's something that maybe we could use to like replace that microchip 608 series part with and still use it in tandem with our security processor. But they really need to separate. I think I've told them this. They really need to separate themselves fully from Satoshi Labs, because we can never be in a strategic situation where our product depends on a competitor's subsidiary's product in order to ship, right? Like we have to buy it from an independent company, because that's you can wield that as a competitive advantage to say, oh, Foundation, you guys are selling so many units. Unfortunately, we're out of stock right now, on this part, or the data of ours of how many units we're selling, right? That would also be something valuable. That what I mean. So I mentioned this to them about the corporate structure. It makes me uncomfortable, and I think they'll be more successful if they can fully spin it off. I mean, maybe they have. I don't know the exact details, but if they could fully separate it, then I think it's going to make them much more successful, because they can go to all the different security device companies. Maybe they go to Yubikey, right? Maybe they go to others, and they really try to sell it as a standalone fabless semiconductor firm. I think that'd be pretty cool.
If you guys are gonna be the Apple, they can be the Samsung, because Apple buys AMOLED panels from Samsung, and
yeah, or they could be the Qualcomm, right? Apple is still trying to develop their own 5G modem, rumored to finally come to the market next year. But for now, they've been buying the 5G chips from Qualcomm. So there's an array of, it's a good point, right? Because Apple is a great example of buying products from competitors, and that happens all the time in the consumer industry. I think you just need more mature organizational structures right in place to handle that. But it's also a little different because Apple's a public company, and so all their numbers are public, in terms of iPhone sales and that kind of thing. So we'll see, but I hope that the Tropic Square guys are able to bring this product to market. I think it would be great.
Yeah, let me ask you possibly the most pessimistic question that I can possibly ask. What's going to happen? So I honestly hope that you're going to sell 1 billion units or something, and every cryptocurrency person around the world is going to get the new Prime hardware wallet. So let's hope this happens. But if the company does not sell according to expectations and you have to shut down, what's going to happen to existing devices, to the passports, to the primes, to everything that was sold? Are they still going to function as designed? What's going to happen to the subscription service? Can that be open sourced so that the community can keep on running it? Or are you going to shut it down entirely?
Yeah, I mean, that would be sad. First is I'd be very sad. So this is one of the biggest benefits, right, of being open source, and this is actually a huge reason why being actually open source, right, like with free and open source software licenses, is better than the source available stuff that we see from like a CoinKite, because if that did happen, if we ever had to shut down, you want the open source community to be able to pick up the mantle, just like how there's a team that is I know you love the Samurai guys, but there's a team that's picked up the Samurai wallet app and is building on that, right? Because that was all open source, and someone would be able to pick up this project. Now, there's some nuances with secure hardware. We've thought about this. One of the issues is Foundation has a 2 of 4 signature scheme for signing firmware updates. If we don't sign the updates, you cannot install updates on your device. However, I think we might be the only ones in the entire industry that have a feature called developer pub key or developer public key. And so right now on our current gen Passport, or of course on Passport Prime, you can load a signing key from a developer you trust, could be yourself, could be someone else, onto the device, and then you can install firmware updates. So that's the first thing. You would still be able to install firmware updates while ensuring that the code is properly signed, because what you would do is whoever took over the project, the open source project, would publish their developer public key. You would download that public key and load it onto the device. So you still get your firmware updates, and you don't compromise the security of your firmware updates, right? Passport can still only install signed firmware. It's just you're adding a key for a developer that you trust. It's like that alone is really cool. No one does that, I think, but us. Then, of course, there's the service. You don't have to use the service firstly, right? And so even if the backup service were to die, you have ample warning, hopefully, and you could still take manual backups, right? You could plug into the USB port, you could plug in a flash drive or a SD card with adapter, and you could do manual backups of your device. You have your key cards, right, which are in your possession. So you can also write down seed words or do seed QRs, or we're going to be supporting multiple different backup formats. And one thing you could do, and we've talked about this, is maybe we can offer in the future like different storage backends if you don't want to use our service. Maybe you could still do automatic backups through our Envoy app, but maybe instead of being stored on our server, it's stored on a different provider, that encrypted blob of data. So that would enable you to still use the apps, use the devices, and still have the same experience. So we've actually thought a decent amount about this. It's one of the weak points though with the newer competitors that are more service oriented, like Bitkey. And I really have a negative opinion of Bitkey's approach with relying on the server for so much functionality. That's
I would never touch that. You're being diplomatic, but honestly, it's a rock. It has no screen. There is no way for you to verify that the device does what it says it does.
I am being diplomatic, though I did write a pretty brutal blog post about it about a year ago on my personal blog. I call it the coaster. You call it the rock. I call it the coaster. It looks like something I want to put my drink on, but I mean, that's the problem, right? And that's why it's so hard to nail these services, because you have like Bitkey where you're relying on the server for everything. You don't even have a screen for any kind of verification. You don't back up any seeds. There's no way to see a seed or any kind of key backup. And so if they're gone, your stuff's gone. And then let's see, like Ledger Recover, trying to do a service, try to make things easier, and you're basically linking your KYC identity and then sending your seed to 3 different custodians, like without any kind of password or any other kind of protection. You're just sending it to them. And so those are great examples of trying to do services to try to make the onboarding and the backups easier while completely compromising on the principles that I think you should have. And what we're trying to do is like offer the services now. We're going to start, having these types of services, but do it in a way where it's all optional, it's all private, and if we disappear, it's not going to impact you at all, right? You still maintain that sovereignty, and that's really hard. And you have no idea how much time has gone into trying to architect, these services and scrapping most of our ideas because we run into some issue that says like, shit, if Apple swaps the Envoy app for something malicious, they could do, this, right? Or if we get shut down on a moment's notice, like FBI raided, all the servers are shut down, all the keys are inaccessible, then everyone loses access to their stuff, right? So you need to architect services that add the convenience, but, don't put yourself in that, situation where the user is dependent on the company running the service.
You mentioned the name Samurai Wallet, and now you do have a platform.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if at any point in the future you're planning to add some sort of CoinJoin feature, maybe something that is exclusive for Passport users to CoinJoin between each other. That could be very cool.
We were actually working on one. And we stopped working on it after the Tornado Cash guys were arrested. So this was really sad for me. I mean, it's more, I should say it's more unfortunate for me because it was a product we were going to launch. It's really sad for the guys that are in prison right now awaiting trial. So I don't want to try to, compare that. And we donated as well, I think, half of Bitcoin to the Samurai guys' defense to the legal fund several months back. But We were working on a CoinJoin offering within our Envoy app. It was probably going to be the easiest to use CoinJoin offering by far, because you kind of know our style of doing things. If anyone's used our like coin selection features or our wallet labeling features or anything like that in Envoy, you can see that we put a lot of thought into the coin control, you know, and it took us months to bring that to market, and it actually is usable. It's not something that, you know, that you'd have to be an advanced feature to use. Likewise, we were going to be doing a CoinJoin feature where it was literally just going to be one tap. You don't have to choose the pool that you're going into. Everything is figured out on the back end. The app calculates the optimal way to do it, and you don't have like separate segmented accounts either. Like, it makes it feel like it's just one account, because the pre-mix post-mix management is always very difficult from a UI perspective, I think, for a user to wrap their heads around. We had it all designed in Figma. We're starting to work on the implementation, and then the Tornado Cash stuff happened, and we decided to pause it. And I would love to bring it back, like, without a doubt. I hope in the next couple of years we'll have the clarity to do so. It's a difficult situation, because I think that the regulatory clarity was there, and I don't think the Samurai guys did anything wrong, yet the Justice Department arrested them anyway. So it was designed to have a chilling effect, you know, on the ecosystem, which I can attest to the fact that it has had a chilling effect, because we've paused development. But if the hopefully there'll be, just with the new administration, hopefully there'll be more, you know, something that happens, or one of these guys will win, you know, the case against them, and then everyone will feel like they can now bring it to market. But the whole situation really sucks, and it's a great example as to how destructive the you know, the outgoing Biden administration has been to the privacy side of the Bitcoin or crypto space.
When I started seeing the advertisements for this new launch for the Prime, of course, you did not mention the name, but you were saying that you're thinking beyond the hardware wallet. And when I saw that, the connection that I made in my mind was with the Bitbox base, which was this full node product that actually had a hardware wallet integrated inside of it. It was made by the Bitbox people.
I remember, yeah. And they also had the cool security seal thing they were working on with the little like dots or bubbles or something for the shipping. They were doing some cool stuff back then.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, did you consider building a full node that integrates all the features and also makes you part of the platform?
Of course, but we're in an interesting position at Foundation, because we have about 20 employees. You know, we've raised about $10 million in venture capital over the last 4 years. And so when we spend a year or 2 years designing a product, we need to make sure that that product can scale to, I mean, my target for Passport Prime would be at least scaling to the ledger size, right, of like, you know, millions of units. So when we design this, right, we're designing this for production to be able to build, to scale to 1 million units without significantly having to change anything in the design. I don't think you could sell 1 million nodes. I don't think it's going to happen. Even if we made some amazing one, I don't think it's going to happen right now. I think that market as it exists is a little too small. And I think that maybe you could do more than just a node, right? Then you kind of get into node home server combo, but then you need to have some really good, you need to have a much larger team, I think, to build proper apps and integrations and stuff for it. Or you need to go like the platform approach, like what we're doing with Passport Prime and building out a developer platform. But like, I don't know. I think it's a hard sell. And I think just to turn it around a little, to be a little provocative, I would say we're all carrying around devices in our pockets 24/7. For they're next to us on our nightstands plugged in when we sleep that have more computing capabilities than what you'd find in like a Start9 or Umbrel node. Why are those not nodes? And I would say it's because the iOS and Android operating systems make it very difficult to run 24/7 background processes that are not baked into the native OS. And so if you were to build a phone from scratch, you could probably build it with a node built in, and you wouldn't need to have like the node at home. So that's probably how I think about it. I still think a standalone node is a really hard product to get sufficient revenue to justify the development for a company like ours.
Let me issue a much more ambitious challenge for whoever is listening. How about you create or basically rewrite from scratch in Rust a Bitcoin client that's going to function on the 500 megahertz processor, and basically have a full node that's going to be pruned, of course, because you only have 64 gigabytes of storage, and allow that to function on a pocket-sized device. I mean, that would be absolutely incredible if it was possible. Also, something like an AI application, something to be your personal assistant, your large language model, your image generator, something like that. If you could get that to function on such a limited hardware, that would be so beautiful.
Well, that's also a great case for a node. I think the node home server combo has been something that still attracts a very like an ultra early adopter audience that likes self-hosting. And now I'm a big self-hosting person. I have security cameras for my house that are going to the server rack, in the basement over power over Ethernet and that kind of thing. But most people are not. But if I do think maybe something that was like your own AI server could potentially attract that much larger audience, because I think everyone watches like Iron Man and they say, I want a Jarvis, at home, or it could come follow around with me. But everyone kind of instinctually knows that you don't really want it living on OpenAI servers, and potentially having something at home could be a way to do it. But I still think that alone is like, if you think about like an organizational structure that's needed to build that kind of thing. I mean, we have like 20 people. I mean, you have to be like around another 20, 30 people. And then you have to be able to have confidence that you'll sell enough of them, right, to justify that expense. And so it makes it really difficult, I think, to practically do it. I believe there's a couple companies that are working on the specific AI ones. And then, of course, there's like the Start9 and the Umbrel that are more like the Bitcoin home server. I don't think there's any company that's thinking of like holistically, right, as trying to combine everything. But you would need some powerful hardware right now. Like you said, it'd be cool if you could do it on low-powered hardware. But as of right now, you need some pretty powerful hardware, and it'll be like a multi-$1,000 device.
I have saved this controversial question for close to the ending.
Yeah.
Because if you want to have your coin listed on Ledger to basically have your own app, you have to pay them a lot of money. I don't know exactly how much, but I've heard some conversations with people who try to get listed, quote unquote, on Ledger, because that's what gives them a sense of legitimacy and proves that the team is committed towards expanding. If you want to build on Trezor, they basically ask you to write the application yourself, and they're going to review it to see if it's on par with their standards. So Trezor, as far as I know, doesn't have an in-house team that's specialized in listing new coins. But now you're going to have this platform for Passport, and it's called Prime. And basically every coin out there can write their own software. But the question is, are you going to gatekeep their entrance and say, only this coin can do because we think it's less shitcoiny, or only this one can participate because they paid us this amount of money?
No, we're not going to gatekeep at all. And I think that you just kind of hit on, you're basically doing my marketing for me, because you just hit on like the biggest issue with Ledger and to some extent Trezor. I don't know where to start. Firstly, I would say we're not just talking coins, and specifically, we're not talking coins for apps, and that's what makes this so hard to wrap your head around. Because right now, when anyone thinks about extending the functionality of a hardware wallet, they think about adding a new coin, right? And they think about like the listing process of going to Ledger or whoever, usually just Ledger. Trezor, almost impossible to add a new coin to, but Ledger, at least they have like an SDK, and you could submit to Ledger Live ecosystem and go through that process and pay them and wait a year and that kind of thing. We are approaching integrations in a different way. We want you to integrate your app, not your coin, your app. So, for example, Cake Wallet, who's our first launch partner, we are working with them to help them build a Cake app to run on Passport Prime. What that means is that they get to bring their brand name, their logo, and their familiar user interface that their users already use on the app onto Passport Prime. That's so cool because now they can tell their users, hey, we have this great security device that we support, and it provides a best-in-class user experience with Cake. It's going to feel just like you're using the Cake mobile app, except it's on dedicated offline hardware. And any specific Cake functionality or terminology that they want to use, they could just use. So when you think of it like that, yeah, sure, the Cake app will bring support for Monero and some of the other coins that they support. We're going to be prioritizing Monero, but they also support Solana, Ethereum, and others. And of course, they support Bitcoin. So it'll bring support for all that. But it's specifically bringing support for the Cake app. And I think the biggest issue with hardware wallets is that they've held back a lot of innovation in the space. An example on the Bitcoin side is, let's say you want to do some cool new Frost-related thing. There's developers that are doing that. There's some guys that are even building their own hardware called Frost Snap, where you literally daisy chain these USB-C devices together. It's cool. They showed me at the conference. I was like, okay, like this is really cool. What my first thought was when they showed me, these guys should not have had to build their own hardware. They should have been able to make a Frost app on this that then offers like a similar user experience. The problem is there's no hardware wallet that offers Frost. And so the hardware wallets are literally holding back the entire ecosystem because if anything new is not going to have support for hardware wallets. And the developers need to wait and beg to get their hardware wallet support. And even worse, the hardware wallet teams need to grow it. Like we would have to hire more and more and more and more people to support all this new stuff that we have to develop first party. So my answer to that is blow it all up. Libertarian style, developer platform. We put out the SDK, go make whatever you want. And the way we're able to do that is with KeoS. KeoS puts each app in its own sandbox. So apps on Ledger, they're not in any sandbox. Your ETH app on Ledger can access the master seed. Your Bitcoin app accesses the master seed. Your Solana app, they all have full access to the master seed. That's one of the reasons why Ledger has to put them through this review process, because they need to make sure the app is not malicious. On Passport Prime and KeoS, app gets its own sandbox. User can bring in their own seed into the app if they have an existing seed, or app requests a hardened child seed from the operating system so that the app has its own hardened seed with its own derivation path, and the app can do whatever it wants in its sandbox, right? But it can't do anything beyond that. And so in order to allow for this more libertarian style app ecosystem where it's totally permissionless to go do whatever you want, it was really important for us to nail the app isolation, the process isolation. We actually selected a security processor with called memory management, hardware memory management, which is the same thing like on your desktop class computer to keep applications in a sandbox. It's like same thing with your iPhone or Android phone. And so we have hardware memory management. We have an operating system that can do that. And so we're able to sandbox everything. And the microkernel helps us there as well. And so that's how we're able to do this permissionless platform. So yeah, go build whatever you want. We're not going to stop you. We will probably have some criteria for listing it within our Envoy app, where you'd be able to one-click install like from our Envoy app with like our app catalog that we're going to be launching. But if you want to ship it directly to your users in your app and don't even talk to us, like, go for it. That's what I hope happens.
Will there be video games? And the reason why I'm asking this is that I remember there was a device, or maybe there still is, on Yale and Bits shop by Ben Ark. It's called the Bowser Wallet. And it doubled down as this video game system for deniability. So whenever someone stopped you and asked, maybe you're crossing the border or something, and they ask, what is this? And you show them a video game and you're like, oh, it's just this silly little device that plays games. Like, do you envision having a game of Tetris or maybe Doom or something?
You don't remember that Founders Edition actually, we had it?
Really?
The original firmware version of Passport Founders Edition had, if you do I don't know if we have it on the new firmware, but like the original firmware for the first year, do you remember like the Konami code, up, up, down, down, left, right, left, right? If you do that on the original Passport Prime firmware, you get a game screen that has Tetris and Snake on it. And we actually removed that, one, because we kept adding more features to the new firmware and we ran out of memory. So there was no room for the code. And two, a lot of users were actually really upset. They said, my Bitcoin hardware wallet should not have games on it because for whatever reason, it increases the attack surface. I don't think they really understood. It's just Python code just living on the device, and it doesn't really do anything. But it's also a great example of how users want to be able to customize the code on their device. So like if you want to buy a Passport Prime and you only want to use it for the features that we ship, do that. If you want to add the code for Cake, you want to install the Cake app, you can install the Cake app, right? And then the code is on your device. And so it's like exactly what it should be in a more like, it's like a choose your own adventure kind of approach. And that's not the case with Trezor. That's not the case with Bitbox, right? Because you either get the firmware that has support for all the different coins, or you go for the Bitcoin only firmware. It is the case for Ledger though, right? You could get a Ledger, you could only install the Bitcoin app, and then it's just a Bitcoin device. So it's really interesting how like that's worked out, where you could argue that the Trezor code base is way more restrictive and limited if you're only doing Bitcoin than having to install like special Bitcoin only firmware with Trezor or Bitbox. And with Passport Prime, it's very similar to Ledger, right? Where you choose what code is running on the device. You install the apps. Hell, if you want to uninstall some of the apps that we give you, like you don't want the 2FA code app, you want that code gone. Okay, uninstall it, right? And I think that's pretty cool. And I also think that's why hardcore Bitcoiners should be excited about this as a platform. I don't know what happened to the libertarian aspect of being a Bitcoiner. I'm a 2013 era Bitcoiner. My view has always been like, do whatever you want. You shouldn't be criticizing people for going and doing something that you don't agree with. It's supposed to be like, we're all trying to be sovereign individuals and go build whatever you want, go do whatever you want. You can try to sell someone on why they should be, only doing Bitcoin, right? But I think it's crazy how it's become Bitcoin versus, shitcoin and all that kind of stuff. When I got into it, it was about the altcoins being almost like test nets, where any of the best features on altcoins may gravitate to Bitcoin one day once they're like rigorously, tested over years on.
No, but that was
coins.
The original idea of Bitcoin maximalism.
Yes, exactly. So I'm a
shifted.
2013 Bitcoin maximalist is a good way to think about it. Yeah.
I think it derailed to the point that everything that is not Bitcoin is a shitcoin, and everything that's built on a network that's not Bitcoin by someone who is not part of this development team is by default shitcoin code that should not even be discussed or considered, which is crazy.
Which is crazy. Yet somehow Monero now has kind of a exemption as part of that. Sometimes with some people, but yeah, I'm a 2013 Bitcoin maxi, and I think people should be able to do whatever they want. And I think one of the biggest problems in the space and the biggest danger is that Ledger is the one selling over 80% of the hardware wallets. To me, that is a huge issue, and the fact that that they're closed source, the fact that what they're showing to users, if you open up Ledger Live, it looks like a giant advertisement for dozens of different like scammy looking things. The Ledger Recover service and other issues I have like that. So my view is like, let's just build a platform that's just going to completely, obsolete their existing devices, and it's going to take time for us to, I think, move beyond the hardware wallet and do that. But that's my goal, is we looking back, and if I hope we can do a podcast in another 3 years, and it can be about how Ledger is now 10% of the market. That's the hope I have.
Let me ask you another tough one that might be slightly funny. Are you gonna send a review unit to Mandrik?
Yeah, I don't know why that would be. Maybe I'm not as up to date with. Are you referring to the unit that he had last time, where he somehow the screen broke and he posted a photo of it? I think. Or is there something else?
I think it was much more than a broken screen. It looked as if he smashed it and then let the dog chew it or something. It looked very worn out for a device that was supposedly new and barely used for a couple of weeks. I still have mine, and it's in mint condition.
That's only ever happened to a handful of screens with Founders Edition, where I think the cable inside the device disconnects because there's like a ribbon cable in there where you like click down, a connector. So you have to smash it really hard for the cable to disconnect, and it maybe a dozen or so devices, I believe, we had to replace of the Founders Edition for issues like that, and we just replaced them. I don't know what happened with that device. I mean, sure, we'll send him one. This thing is a Gorilla Glass. I mean, I got a knife. I got like a dust knife here. There's no scratch or anything on the screen. So you can hit it with a knife or a razor blade. You're fine. I guess you could drop it. Maybe you can get the glass to shatter, right? If you hit the quarter perfectly, take a hammer to it. But you can even you can put it in water. So I think we're the only ones in the industry as well where we haven't gotten the certification yet. So like we say on the website, water resistant pending certification, but we designed it to be fully waterproof and submersible. The power button on top is gasketed, and the USB port on the bottom is gasketed, and the whole thing is sealed with epoxy with like a machine that 3D dispenses the epoxy. So, I mean, we'll see what happens, but it should be at least water resistant. Hopefully we can make the boating accidents, a thing of the past. So Mandrik, I guess, can try to destroy his and see what he does.
Yeah, that was funny, and I'm happy that you moved past that without any major incidents.
We've been through a lot, Vlad. I mean, you followed us for a while. We've been through a lot.
I remember that article on Medium that emerged the moment when you first came out, and there was this huge conspiracy leading you to Eric Voorhees for some reason.
No, I'll explain that. I mean, it was it was definitely NBK who wrote it, or someone who was like communicating with NBK, and they tried to make it look like we were scammers, like total scammers. And then the Eric Voorhees connection, personally, like, why would it matter if Eric Voorhees had invested in us? Like, what does that matter? But he didn't, right? One of our venture capital investors that invested in us in the first 2020 Angels and whatever round put it's like a $50,000 check. I mean, we're not talking like millions of dollars here, right? It's like a $50,000 check. one of their limited partners for their fund was Eric Voorhees. So Eric Voorhees invests in their venture fund. The venture fund invests 50 grand in foundation in 2020. And then they try to spin it like it's some conspiracy theory. And it also shows whoever wrote that has no idea how venture works, because we don't know the LPs of most of the venture capital firms, right, that invest in us. Like they go out, they raise money from many different limited partners. I've never talked to Eric Voorhees. I've emailed with him once. They connected me with him over email like a year later to try to get him as like an angel investor, in 2021 or something like that, or 2022. But I've never even had a phone call with the guy. So the whole thing was insane.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. I love Eric. I think he was honestly, right in so many regards. Like I underestimated his vision, but he seems to be mostly right.
I would love to have Eric as an angel investor. I have no problem with him. I don't understand how you could write a blog post and try to make it seem like it's some nefarious thing. He is one of the only people in the space that has stayed fully true to his roots, blowing up his old business effectively to keep things decentralized. Like that's pretty cool. And I don't know what happened. It used to be about, I mean, you and I can like reminisce on the older days, but it used to be about like principles, right? Oh, I'll bring it up. The Roger Ver thing is insane. That's happening right now. Like you can't celebrate the guy for being, indicted for tax evasion by the US when his own lawyers and accountants, it seems like if you believe his story, right, advised him on how to file these taxes. Like when did Bitcoiners become the ones celebrating the IRS? Like what the hell is going on? Just because you don't like the guy doesn't mean you can't like have consistent principles and evaluate everything you see through consistent principles instead of just throwing everything out the window and saying, this guy bad, I'm a good maxi. That's how the world works,
I mean, there is a lot of virtue signaling, and I do get that because the way to get appreciated and talk on the stage of conferences and whatever is to score these internet virtue points where you just say what is the most toxic and mean, but also applaudable for some reason. It's silly because these guys are cartoon characters. They put themselves in a position where there's no nuance.
Yeah.
Honestly, I do get the whole idea that Bitcoin is king and it's the one that pumps the hardest and is also the one that performs best in bear markets. But to put something like Monero in the same basket as Terra Luna or BitConnect or OneCoin or whatever, like the worst of scams, and say that everything is equally a scam, it just lacks nuance and it's hindsight. And I do believe that there's, I think, like a 2 bear market point after which you can safely state that something has survived and has earned its place, because it's fair to criticize something that's new and is centralized. But after it goes through a couple of bear cycles, it's fairly safe to assess that it has some merits. And there's a reason why it's still around. Because there are lots of coins you hear about during bull markets and then they vanish forever.
Yeah. Like Grin or something.
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple of Grin developers and they're very passionate about it. And they say, the only reason why it never caught on is that there's no early adopter benefit. Everyone who joins the system at any point during the life cycle of the network earns the same rewards. So there's no first mover advantage. It's not like Bitcoin where a large percentage of the supply was mined in the first 4 years.
Interesting.
So it's like software. I don't know why. To me, everything is like Linux right now. The way that I see it, you have a distribution of Linux that is optimized for this. You have one for privacy, one for contracts, one for security. I don't really understand why there's hatred and there's this idea that the other one should not exist.
Right, like the feuds between the distros. Yeah.
But once again, privacy also has a very toxic environment with Calyx and Graphene and Signal and Telegram. And I'm pretty sure there was Wasabi and Samurai for a few years. So it's almost like it's a zero-sum game of developers trying to get as much as they can of the otherwise very limited market share. And I do understand, NVK's strategy to be super toxic and virtue signal all the time, because that's the only way in which he can stay Bitcoin only and still sell devices. But honestly, I would never touch a cold card again, just because it's not open source.
Yeah, and my attitude has evolved a lot. I mean, it had to have evolved a lot to go from being really focused on making an air-gapped Bitcoin-only hardware wallet to now making something that is not even a hardware wallet and has Bluetooth on it. Like that alone is, I think, is a big shift. But also, I think just my view is more just free market view, where I want to build a platform that offers the best design and user experience for the consumer, that makes it easier to onboard more people than have onboarded so far in hardware wallets or off cold storage self-custody, but then also making something that all the developers want to use and that they're not constantly complaining about, that they don't feel constrained using, and have that more permissionless open ecosystem, which aligns with the original, maybe, Bitcoin ethos, right? More of the freedom, capitalism, open markets, open source, privacy preserving. And so it's funny, this product is a little different, and it's hard to compare it with anything that exists on the market today, but our principles and values are exactly the same. And so I'm excited about that. I think, and it makes me feel good, because the same stuff I said 3-4 years ago about importance of open source and privacy and all that kind of stuff is the exact same thing I'm saying today. I'm trying to be really, as consistent as possible with it as I can be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's better to act based on first principles than to pursue a revisionist ideology.
Yeah.
Which is eating itself. Like it's a death cult at this point. Even guys like Hadlonat are getting their asses kicked for not wanting to support MicroStrategy stock investing. Because apparently that's more moral, to go to the stock market and KYC and be a part of the mainstream financial system, as opposed to buying something that's not Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I know, it sort of beats me. But that's also why I made a shameless plug. This is the Privacy Magazine, which I released this year. It has a picture of Michael Saylor and Pepe saying that it feels bad, man, because he's being surveilled right here by Michael Saylor. But he's so blinded by Saylor that on the back cover you can see that he's actually happy under surveillance and there's no escape door.
It's actually pretty creative.
It was drawn by my girlfriend. It's very cool. I can send you one of these, Zach.
Sure. I think I have one of your old magazines up on the shelf.
Yeah, which one is it?
I don't know. It's orange on the side. I guess they all are. You want me to take off my headphones and hold on.
Sure. My God, that's a first edition.
What was that, sir?
That's a first edition from the summer of 2021. I guess it was from
valuable.
around the time when we recorded the interview. Can you tell me what number it is? It should be on next to the last page on the cover.
Oh wow, you gave me one of the last ones. 144 out of 150.
Okay. I mean that's a pretty limited edition.
Well,
I'm
this
happy you
is, I
still
don't know
have
if
it.
this is my property or company property, but we, maybe on eBay one day it'll go for, a Bitcoin or something.
But this is a more collaborative approach with 32 articles by 30 different people. And they're mostly about privacy stuff. There's some Monero, there's some Zcash. I wrote some stuff about Bitcoin and how there's no privacy really. It's just deniability. And it goes worse over time. So at the time of the transaction, you can assess that nobody really knows who you are. But since it's a permanent open ledger, I mean, the fact that there's no information right now doesn't mean that there cannot be in the future. And even if you have perfect practices, the person who's receiving funds from you can actually dox you if they know who you are. So
Cool.
information can add up. And it's not ideal. I keep talking about this. I get called a shitcoiner for even considering it. But I guess a good way to end this is that we have to constantly have this existential question of why are we still doing what we're doing? And after a while, it gets very, I don't know, you get jaded. You see the same cycle, the same sort of arguments being presented, same fights. And you have to ask yourself, why are you still here? Because maybe some of us, I'm not that rich yet to retire, but I guess I'm better off than I was 4 or 8 years ago. And I do have to ask myself, why am I still doing this when I could just watch and enjoy? Or not watch at all, not care, just detach myself. And I think my mission right now is to try to change the culture a little bit, to get people to remember why this started in the first place, as we get politicians and large investors telling us what we should be doing for the number to go up. And that seems to be the only rationale. I saw a tweet by Adam Back a couple of days ago in which he said we should upgrade Bitcoin to post-quantum cryptography so that traders no longer spread this FUD that Bitcoin is quantum vulnerable. And I'm like, is this really the only reason why we talk about improving Bitcoin? Because traders are bearish and we should alleviate any sort of FUD. And that's why we upgrade, not to make it more functional or to make it usable for more people, but to get rid of criticism. It's silly. I don't know. We're at this point where everything is justified by price movements.
Yeah, I'm jaded as well. I think that's a good word for it. And it's very hard for me to even listen to many Bitcoin podcasts anymore. So I hope people listen to this one.
Oh, I think I have the smartest audience around.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been around over the last year when I think I had at least a couple of controversial moments. And they do get it, and they do see some value in this, because echo chambers can be fun, but after a while, you get tired of smelling your own farts. And there's only so many metaphors you can write about the same idea, just riffing on the idea of sound money and ending worse and blah, blah, utopian stuff that comes to your mind when you first discover Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But after that, you have to really think beyond the memes and really try stuff and understand the limitations and ask yourself, is it really going to be like this? Are we going to have everything divided by 21 million coins? And the first question is this going to scale for everyone to be using it?
We're probably going to have to stop talking. Otherwise, you're probably going to get me canceled.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I think it's good to let listeners reflect on this. And it's also past 2 a.m. here. I guess my face all through the interview was very tired. But I enjoyed this a lot. And I'm very happy that you have a new product. I'm happy that you're still on the market pushing for innovation in a direction that was not explored prior to your project. and it's super cool. And I encourage everyone to buy one of these Prime devices.
What about you? Did I sell you on it, or are you still going to be using that Trezor stateless?
I mean, I do like the Trezor. It's very hard for me to get rid of it, but I'm curious to try your new device. You said it has a larger screen. Maybe it's easier for me to recover keys on it.
Yeah. And we do support out of the box temporary seeds or ephemeral, seeds as well, kind of like a seed signer functionality. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited. We're going to be, I guess just to wrap up my end, because I do have to hop off in a sec as well. I know it's really late for you. We are pre-selling 1,000 of these as part of our early access program, which we're aiming to ship in March. It's going to have beta firmware to start, which will then, go through a few cycles and then be upgraded to the V1 release. And then for those that want to just wait until the device is generally available, you can also place a reservation on our website. And, our first launch partner is Cake, and that will provide support for Monero and then more than just Monero, in addition to, of course, all the great stuff that we're supporting out of the box. But we expect to have a lot more developers that are going to be building apps on KeeOS, and hopefully we'll be able to do some, big announcement in the middle of the year when the SDK, is fully live. So if you do buy one of these, know you're not just buying a product with the functionality that it comes with on day one. You're buying something that you can, update and install apps on, and kind of over a couple year time horizon, really customize to do whatever you want to be able to do with it.
Yeah, so side note, I have this Nintendo 3DS, which I haven't used in years, but I installed some custom firmware on it because Nintendo discontinued the App Store. And they even have a ChatGPT fork, and they even have a lot of cool applications. Like, I would not even expect this to exist. They have homebrew games, but they also have some Office software, and I'm blown away. And I hope that your device is also going to welcome some of these builders to put some stuff on it and make it more useful.
Hopefully Doom, all right? We could start there.
If it, it gets that legendary status. Once it runs Doom, you can make memes of it.
Well, it'll be good because we don't have a speaker, but we do have haptic feedback, so you could at least, program it up with some haptics so that the thing vibrates.
500 megahertz is overkill anyway. I saw totally. Doom running on a pregnancy test.
I was going to say that's the best example that I've seen as well.
Or I know that there were these touch bars on the MacBook Pros.
Yeah.
They made it run on that.
That's funny. Cool. Well, it was great to catch up, Vlad. Thanks for doing this late at night.
Likewise.
Yeah.
And good luck with your new product. I hope it sells 1 million units or more.
Thank you. Thank you.